The work of an Iowa-based organization, Bailing Out Benji, kind of helped spark this investigation. Can you tell me about that?
That resolution filed in King County Superior Court requires the company to pay the state $3.75 million with interest.
Bailing Out Benji
regularly looks through these records of dogs' movement from state to state.
Bailing Out Benji
played a key part in unraveling a nationwide puppy scheme.
Bailing Out Benji,
an organization that's been working across the country to stop the pipeline of puppy mill breeders.
Bailing Out Benji.
I will use my voice because it will come out, and I will keep doing it until there are no more puppy mill dogs.
What's up? It's Justine. I'm the producer for Truth, Lies, and Puppy Mills. I am here before the beginning of the episode because we have some responses to the question, what is a puppy mill? So some of us within Bailing Out Benji sent out that question to people in our lives just to see what the first response would be from people who don't work within this space and don't necessarily have much specific exposure to the research that Bailing Out Benji does. So I'm going to read some of them now, and then our lovely hosts have already heard these answers previously, and that is going to be what they talk about in part of this episode. So we wanted to make sure we had context for why they were talking about that at the beginning of the episode. So these are some of the answers to the question, what is a puppy mill? One person says, in my understanding, a puppy mill is an unethical dog breeding system. It typically involves mistreatment of the dogs and reduces them to sources of monetary gain, as opposed to living creatures. There is a difference between breeders and puppy mills, namely in their treatment of the animals. All puppy mills are breeders, but not all breeders are puppy mills, if that makes sense. I think the key aspect of a puppy mill is that it operates directly in conjunction with systems of capitalism while ignoring the basic rights of their animals, such as compassion, food, water, play, socialization. The dogs are kept in cages, reducing the surface area each dog takes up maximizes profit and production. Plus, the poor conditions often result in the dogs having more health problems later in life. Another person said, I believe a puppy mill is a place where certain breeds of dogs are kept in cages and impregnated only to breed. They don't have free roaming privileges or are kept like most dogs in homes that are part of the family. I picture a puppy mill kind of like where cattle are kept for slaughtering in a separated part of a property, seen only as objects with a means to an end. Another person said, a puppy mill is where profit is put over the welfare of the dogs being bred. It looks like dirty wire cages where dogs may not see daylight, grass, nature. They may be under-socialized and aggressive or timid. It looks sad and awful. Someone else said, puppy mills equal breeding facilities for raising a high number of dogs quickly, often producing low genetic variability with the same breeding animals being used over and over. This can produce a dog that has a lot more health issues. They look like a large number of dogs being kept in small spaces with little actual human care or interaction for the most part. Vet care can be limited based on a only for profit mentality and not on producing healthy or quality dogs. Lastly, someone said, a puppy mill is where people illegally breed dogs and sell them. Inbreeding often happens there, which results in health problems for the puppies. Dogs will be sold to new owners who think they're getting one thing and end up with another. So those are some responses that we got to the question, what is a puppy mill? And now, here are your hosts of Truth, Lies, and Puppy Mills to talk about how Bailing Out Benji defines a puppy mill.
Hi all, welcome to this week's episode of Truth, Lies, and Puppy Mills. We're so grateful for you joining us this week. I'm Alexis, and I'm joined by my colleagues this week, Mindi and Kristen. And this week we're here to talk about puppy mills. Big shocker. But you guys just heard our little intro where we actually asked the public their definition of a puppy mill. So we wanted to go kind of into the general public and see kind of what are those definitions of puppy mills and what do people think they are? Because today we're going to be giving our definition of a puppy mill and kind of having a discussion about maybe those myths about puppy mills and things that people should know of, like what really makes a puppy mill a puppy mill.
Yeah, did you guys hear anything that you were surprised by? Because I did.
Yeah, there was a lot of consistency, I feel like. But yeah, some of the words that folks said talking about, we had one comment, I don't know if it's in the recording or not, but we had one comment about inbreeding, which I thought was interesting. I had not really thought about that. But it seemed like there was some good consistency. What did you hear that surprised you?
Well, the general consensus was profit over welfare, which is what we've said for years, and was really, I was glad to hear that. Yeah. Some of the interesting things I heard, the illegal breeding part of it, right?
Yes, that's right.
So many people think puppy mills are only illegal, and that's not the case.
Yeah.
One of the people that we asked, I should say, they said, all puppy mills are breeders, but not all breeders are puppy mills.
Yeah.
Did I say that right?
Yes.
Yeah. Don't want that to be like misconstrued.
No,
yes.
you got it.
And so when they said that, I was like, that's the point, right? We want people to understand all puppy mills are breeding dogs.
Yeah.
They're doing it in inhumane conditions, I should say. A lot of people flagged they're often in cages. They're dirty cages. But yeah, the unlicensed, illegal part of it kind of made me pause, because that's not the case. We see a lot of licensed facilities with issues.
Yeah. It's surprising if the general public doesn't quite know that, just because you're inspected by your state or your government, that doesn't really mean that you're not a puppy mill or that you have a good facility.
Right, and it's so hard too, because the people who are talking about this, they painted a specific picture, right? They were saying dirty cages, cramped cages. One person likened it to a cattle operation and animals living in confinement and being bred for a specific purpose without any ethics involved. And I think that's what a lot of people think. They visualize that picture of the cages and the filth, and that kind of stops them from understanding what an unethical breeder looks like if they're not caging puppies necessarily.
Yeah. No, because I mean, we do have people that bring up to us a lot, like backyard breeders, of like, puppy mills aren't always in the kennels or the cages, because sometimes you can have poor treatment of animals in someone's house, and I mean, that could be a puppy mill as well, just because they don't have the facility that we might, as people looking at regulated places, see kennels being in.
Right. So I have a question, Alexis. Pop quiz. How many puppy mills are in the United States today?
10,000?
False. False.
Yep.
That is, and you know that's false. I'm just teasing you. But that's what we know. Kristen, what did you do today, this afternoon?
So I Googled it, as you do. So I asked Google, what I asked was how many breeders are there in the United States? How many dog breeders are there in the United States? And Google's response was basically, I don't know, which was fun. Yeah. And then it said, there are 10,000 puppy mills in the United States. And so I thought, well, that's interesting. So even Google's like, I have no idea how many breeders there are, but I can tell you there's 10,000 puppy mills. And so then I went and asked our friend ChatGPT. ChatGPT said, when I asked how many breeders are in the U.S., I made a note because I knew I wouldn't remember, because ChatGPT was a little more nuanced in its answer. It said that there are 20,000 to 100,000 breeders, which essentially is the same as Google's I don't know. That's a big range. So yeah, ChatGPT's answer to how many breeders was 20,000 to 100,000, or yeah. So they don't know either. But I thought it was interesting that Google said, I don't know how many breeders, but there's 10,000 puppy mills. And I'm like, interesting. You pulled that number.
Yeah.
So
where'd that come from?
Yeah.
Well, it's the number that's been in the media. It's something that everyone has been sharing. But as like an organization who's very research focused, we have a very hard time because we have no idea where that number is coming from. Because as far as we know, we're the only ones that are really tracking the breeding operation to the extent that we can, where we're tracking CVI records, the certificates of veterinary inspection showing the movement of animals across state lines, which give us good information about both licensed and unlicensed people, and the only ones tracking online sales, which give us an idea of like how big maybe the online market is. But even with the numbers that we're pulling, nothing quite yet is adding up, or might seem to be exceeding that 10,000 or that 20,000. Well, yeah, I guess nothing really has added up to those numbers that are being posted or that people who are Googling are being given. So what's happening is there's false information or not accurately represented data out there, or even data out there to prove what's really out there. So
what do we know then about how many breeders are out there? How are we trying to get into that?
Yeah. So part of our research is that we do try to track all of those licensed breeders, both federally with the USDA, which is public information on the USDA's website, and then we're trying to also track the state licensed breeders for states that do track those, because not everybody does. We're trying to pull those numbers of how many state licensed breeders there are. And we should note that sometimes there's overlap between state licensing and federally licensing, but that's where our database comes in so helpful, is because we can track who has both licenses or only one. And so we are trying to pull that number, and inspection reports are one of the ways that we do that. But also our online brokering projects is another way we're trying to do that, because we have 15,000 advertisers from one website that we're trying to get a gauge of, like, are they licensed? Are they not? Where do they fit into this picture? So those are some of the places that we're pulling some of our numbers from.
Right, and we talked last week about what licensing looks like on the federal level, and how it's completely different, wild west on the state level. Every state handles it differently. But right now we're tracking around 4,500 licensed breeders. So that is USDA breeders, USDA brokers, and state facilities we're currently tracking. We're going to be adding a lot more state facilities to that number, because we're just in the, I wouldn't say the beginning, but middle to the end of this state inspection project. So even with that number, 4,500 licensed facilities, you would have to double that to even get to the 10,000 number. And you would be making an assumption that a license equals puppy mill. And I think that's what's been happening. A few months ago, or maybe last year, there was a campaign called USDA Walk Away. And it was put out there by other advocates to try and get people to walk away from USDA breeders. And that was because USDA has lax regulations. It is very closely tied with the puppy mill industry in the public perception arena. People really do think that if you have a license, you are a puppy mill. But when we put that out there, we're sending people to unlicensed facilities. We're making it seem like no matter how you're licensed, you must be a bad person because you have a license to breed.
That feels so backwards to me. I'm like, what?
So you think, oh, like, eyes on the facility, like, that's good, right? Because you're having more pressure of, like, trying to meet a certain standard, whereas, like, unlicensed breeders kind of get to do what they want because they don't have to adhere to any type of state regulation, federal regulation. Some places are the wild, wild west, but it is kind of an interesting way of thinking of licensed breeders.
I can see thinking like the USDA is understaffed, or they're not, putting out violations as they should. But so I don't know if that's the case or not, but I could see that argument being made. But to go to, like, just because they're licensed means they're a puppy mill, like that, I don't know what that would be based on.
Part of that's our fault. And, like, I want to take ownership of that because of our puppy mill maps, right?
Yeah.
We've talked about it, I think, on the show, but also just in our everyday conversations. Those maps were licensed breeders' maps, truly at the root of it. I collected the data on the USDA breeders and then put dots on a map, and I showed the number of adult breeding dogs in the kennel, so it was color-coded. They were very instrumental in educating the public. But we had we're a big reason why people think license equals puppy mill. And that's kind of what we're trying to break down with our podcast, because we always kind of knew that wasn't accurate. When there's a USDA breeder with 4 dogs and no violations, and then you have a breeder with 700 adult dogs and 50 violations, like, where the problem is.
Yeah.
And I just think we were so young in our infancy and in our research gathering, era, I guess, that we were just doing what everyone else was doing, right? And
I think to that too, it's something we talk a lot about behind the scenes, is like the narrative that has been drawn a lot. And the narrative for a long time is that like commercial breeder equals puppy mill. And so when you have these like interchangeable words and you're like, oh, I'm following that narrative, that's what's been said all along. But like when you really look at it, when you look at the data or you look at the inspection report and say like, oh, this facility may have like 50 dogs, but they're not getting violations at either the federal or state level, and they seem to be performing at a good standard, or I don't know what word to, a better standard, yeah. Then you kind of see of like, oh, well, why has the narrative been so long about, oh, commercial breeder equals puppy mill? Because actually there is a difference. So,
but historically speaking, there wasn't a difference.
That's
like I
true.
will argue that for the history of the USDA, there were a lot of violations. There were a lot of very subpar facilities. And now we're seeing some of those facilities changing, but they're responding to the backlash and responding to the pressure.
Yeah.
So I feel like, just like the Adopt Don't Shop slogan, like maybe there were things that were rooted in fact 20 years ago.
Yeah.
And now we're seeing progress. We're seeing time for nuanced discussion. Yeah. And we're seeing the importance of having that discussion, because then when you're talking to a consumer, you want them to make the right choice. They're not going to make the choice I personally make. Not everyone is going to adopt the old black dogs, right? Like that's just not a thing.
Yeah.
But we can have conversations with people in our life every day so they at least know where not to go that has been doing harm to the animals in their care.
Yeah.
Do you think the message of commercial breeder equals puppy mill, is that more prevalent in this industry? Because I feel like the general public doesn't think that. Like, I know people who will go buy from a breeder. They would never, ever buy if they thought that breeder was a puppy mill. They may not know enough to do the research to find out, but their intention would never be to equate those two. They understand that there's, good commercial breeders and then there's puppy mills, even if they can't really say what goes into what.
We talk about it all the time. We're kind of in an echo chamber, right? So animal welfare organizations are really leading the conversation when we're educating the public. So it's us saying specifically what we want the public to hear. And then there's the public who is not even hearing what we're saying. So the people that you're talking about, or the people that answered questions at the beginning of this episode, a lot of them said unlicensed, illegal. And that is a huge part of the problem. There are a lot of unlicensed, illegal facilities. But when we have for years made it seem like every licensed breeder is the problem, people have no idea where to safely go. And so I do think it's us. We've created that. We've created that echo chamber. I don't know how it's translating out to the public, truly.
Yeah. I mean, from like, let's maybe take our research email for an example, somewhere that like the public gets to send us questions, or like that I give them information about a breeder, and like what are they maybe like turned away from or not. So I do think like commercial breeders, people think are like large scale operations. And there are some people that are maybe deterred away from it, but there are people from the public that do care more about like, well, do they have violations, or is there anything negative that you know about this facility? And that's kind of what deters them away from buying. So that's also the thing too of like conversations of like, puppy mills, are they large scale operations, or can you have a lot of dogs? Like a lot of dogs, maybe more than what people would think you would be able to take care of. But behind the scenes, if you think about it, and someone has a lot of dogs and maybe has enough people to take care of them, they have staff, they have a schedule, it's more of like a work environment for them that they're taking care of the animals, they might not be a puppy mill. And so I think maybe some of the general public might understand this more of like a business side of things, and so they might not be deterred away from large, I don't know where I'm going with that.
I know where you're, so for example, we had someone email last year and a half ago, and they were like, is this facility a puppy mill? Which, to be honest, when we get those emails, we never respond and say, yes, they're a puppy mill. Here you go. I don't know if we've ever said in an email, yes, that place is a puppy mill. We always say, well, here are the inspection records, here are the red flags we see. If you're going to buy from them, here are the questions to ask. So we've always led with like the education.
Yeah.
But we did have someone who emailed, and it was a breeder who had like 300 adult dogs. All we had was the USDA inspection, and it was clean. So Alexis was like, hey, 300 adult dogs, that's a lot. You might want to, ask these questions, yada, yada. And the person was like, oh, but the inspection is clean? Okay, that's it. That's all I need to know. So that shows us there's a whole spectrum of people buying too.
Yes.
And when we want people to do exactly what we're telling them to do, that's really hard because of the spectrum and because of the scope of who we're dealing with.
Yeah, and the different definitions that people have of a puppy mill that kind of plays a factor too.
Right, and our different morals and ethics. Because some people might walk into a breeding facility with 10 dogs and think this is phenomenal. Others might walk in and say 10 is too many. My personal, when I was making the maps, I had to kind of figure out what my number was. Like, where do I feel? And I thought 50. I thought 50 was too many. Well, now I've been into some facilities, and I'm not going to tell other people how to feel on this situation because we all have different thoughts and feelings. But I walked into a facility, and I couldn't tell you how many dogs were there because of how well they were kept. The dogs all had space. It wasn't loud. It wasn't barking, or wasn't, overwhelmingly barking. But I was shocked to find out that that facility had like 75 dogs. And so then I had to stop and think, okay, I thought 50 was my cutoff. I thought 50 was too many. Now I'm seeing a place that on paper has 75 adult dogs, and I'm not overwhelmed by the number.
It's kind of that reassessment of like, oh, you can't learn everything from papers, which is kind of the only way prior to our field research that we were able to make our own assumptions about puppy mills or about facilities. So it has been quite eye-opening to see that, because you do have to reassess. And once again, that means like, oh, your puppy mill definition is kind of evolving, because it is stepping away more of like, oh, well, they have this like many dogs, but well, maybe the number doesn't really factor into puppy mill. So
every day I'm really relearning. Justine said, what was it on the other day? Deconstructing. Yeah. We're all deconstructing what we've known for years because we're just seeing a completely different side of it off of paper. And that's scary and that's yucky, and that's why people are pushing back a little bit, I think, too, because it's not clean. I cannot say ethically USDA license means a puppy mill anymore. 10 years ago I did. I was that person. We have protest signs that say similar things, right? But it's okay to evolve. It's okay to admit that you were wrong, or admit that you weren't presented with all the facts when you were making a decision.
And 10 years ago, we were saying there's 10,000 puppy mills.
Yeah.
And that was 10 years ago. Yeah. And there's still 10,000 puppy mills. And all these organizations have been working to get rid of puppy mills for 10 years, and there's the exact same number? Like that.
Right, and
feels weird.
That's the hard part.
Maybe not quite accurate.
No, right, and that's the hard part with what we're doing, because it's like people ask us how many puppy mills, or how many puppy mills have you shut down, or how many puppy mills have been shut down, and it's not ever going to be an easy answer. There's never going to be a number. So of all of those facilities we're tracking, we have around 8,000 in our database. 1,200 of those, or maybe it's 1,700. It doesn't matter. 1,700 of those have violations in the last 5 years.
1,700, yeah.
Yes. Yeah. 1,700 have violations in the last 5 years.
Alexis' steel trap brain has it. When she knows what number you're looking for, she's like, I got you at 1,700.
The hard part is it changes every day.
Yes.
Because we are adding new inspection records every day. Yeah. And so we're constantly finding breeders with violations, but also dozens without. And that's why we're trying to get the public to understand, like, a violation doesn't mean it's a bad place, and a clean inspection report doesn't mean it's a good place. We are living in a really gray world. Yeah. And a lot of violations are paperwork, which still needs to be done.
Yes.
But even more are veterinary care and housing. And so when we're looking at this stuff, we want to focus on the facilities that historically are doing a bad job. Yeah. The facilities that do not appear to want to upgrade their standards in the slightest, and they're the ones bringing the heat to the whole industry. So what can Bailing Out Benji do with our research and our advocacy to stop the cruel and inhumane facilities while acknowledging that some facilities have made progress? Those facilities aren't our enemy. We need to be focusing on the places who refuse to do better. And that includes, puppy stores who refuse to do better, and online websites. Like, the spectrum is huge, and I think that we need to focus on every part of it individually and really show the world how there is a spectrum in each. Because before we thought the puppy mill industry was one thing. And we're realizing, just like the animal welfare world is quote unquote one thing, it's not. We're all different. We all operate differently and have our own thoughts and opinions, and yeah.
Okay, so now that we've talked all around the subject and have thoroughly confused our viewers and listeners, are we going to talk about what we consider to be a puppy mill and how people can avoid supporting them with their money?
Yeah, I think so. I guess, I know it's kind of a complex issue, and it's very hard because like we're not in our database going like, oh, this person's a puppy mill, oh, this is a puppy mill. So it's really just this collection of like, what are our observations of things that we see maybe with paperwork or from our real life experiences. Probably because some of the people that might have researched this industry the most might have an ability to maybe give a definition on this. But I guess we would start with the thing that people know most is those that are putting profit before the welfare of their animals, because these are facilities that maybe are just trying to get out as many puppies as possible without actually coming back to the welfare of the animals. Are they being socialized? Are you caring about the genetics of the dogs, which is something that some of our commenters had mentioned, because people are really big on like OFA testing, or like, are you caring about your breeding lines, and like, are you testing for those things that maybe this breed has and that you don't want to pass on, that might fall on the consumer or alter the dog's life later on. So I guess that's the start to our puppy mill definition, something that is maybe more familiar to the public, that they hear quite a bit, but I think we would be in agreement of that's a good start to a puppy mill definition.
And I'm going to add something in that's going to make people disagree, probably, but at Bailing Out Benji, we're really trying to focus on how the animals are raised.
Yes.
So when we are talking about puppy mills, we again are looking for how the animals are living. Do they have violations? Are they living in cages their whole lives? Do they get to go outside? Do they get to be good dogs, real dogs outside? Does the breeder have a rehoming plan?
Yeah.
Exactly. Do they retire their dogs early, or are they breeding them until their bodies give out? So there are some things we can look for. The part that I'm going to say that probably will upset people is that Bailing Out Benji isn't necessarily focused on how puppy mills sell. Surprisingly, puppy mills sell everywhere. They're selling in newspapers. We've got the Steve Cruzy guy selling in newspapers, right? Selling in pet stores, selling online. Like, the problem is anyone can sell anywhere. And so as we've been working on this for 14 years, and others have been working on it much longer, we have fallen into tropes. We have fallen into slogans, and we have said, puppy mills sell here, which is true. Puppy mills do sell to pet stores. Puppy mills do sell online. However, all of the organizations have always acknowledged some of the pet store puppies come from puppy mills. Most of the pet store puppies, 99% is a number I've seen, puppy mills sell to pet stores. So it's like, we are so focused on how these people sell that we have now really kind of pinholed the industry. So if you are a responsible breeder and you don't know how to sell your dogs and you want to sell on puppies.com, is Bailing Out Benji going to call you a puppy mill? Because now you're marketing your animals online. Puppies.com is at the root of it just an agency. It's a website for people to sell puppies. They're not a broker in the sense that like Puppy Spot and other websites are. So are we saying that because you sell on puppies.com, you're a puppy mill? Are we saying because you sell in a pet store, you're a puppy mill? Or is Bailing Out Benji more focused on the adult breeding dogs and the amount of time they're spending in the facilities and making sure that is as humane as possible while getting rid of the bad guys?
No, I think that's more like us. I think it comes back to like making these statements of like, oh, puppy mills sell on all of these avenues, but no one's really collected the data of like how many puppy mills are selling there. So when you're scaring people away from these avenues, it's really not teaching them how to look for that responsible breeder, what signs to look for once again. So maybe shifting the focus away from, the avenue, away from the avenue, but more of like the quality of that person that is selling there, and what's happening at their facility.
Here's my hot take, and you tell me if I'm wrong. It seems like over the years, then these groups that are doing this work have really kind of dumbed it down for consumers. So we want to give them the slogan. We want them, so people are asking us, how many puppy mills are there? Why is that important to you when you're selecting your dog? They're saying, if they have over 50 dogs, they're a puppy mill. Like, we're trying to make it so simple. And I know that we crave simplicity and we want things to be simple, but there's nothing about this that is simple. Mm-hmm. And so, like, we were talking earlier when we saw the sign that said research before you buy. And I'm like, hi, I am new here. How? Like, I hear you saying research before you buy, and I want to research before I buy. I don't know where to even begin with that. Like, I am just the average person on the street. I don't know what that means. And so I think that's where we are really shifting into that education piece and trying to educate consumers more than just, if there's more than 50 dogs, if it's USDA licensed, it's a puppy mill. If it's, it's not that simple. And it would be easier if it was, but it's not. And so you do have to educate yourself and do that work, and they need folks like us to tell them how to do that.
And that's it. We've been missing the whole time the guardrails. Mm-hmm. We've told people don't, no, with no tips on where to go. And the tips we have given have been very small, very, very limited. Go to this breed club. They might have 3 breeders. Get on their wait list. It's still so important to find a responsible breeder and take the time to do that. Mm-hmm. But the definition of responsible that we've given is so narrow that it is really hard for any person to just walk down the street and find, I don't want to say find a dog, but find a breeder that they trust that they can buy from. I want everyone to adopt. Not everyone is. So what guardrails can we put in place to make them avoid the puppy mills themselves?
And setting impossible standards for people trying to breed dogs in a good way.
Yeah. We're moving the goalpost each time. They do make those improvements.
Right. Yeah.
And when we started this too, I say this, our journey, when we started visiting USDA kennels, someone literally told me, but Mindi, you told me reputable breeders don't sell to pet stores. And now you're telling me something different. And that was such a shocking moment for me because you're right. I do tell you things. I have not taught you how to think. I have not taught you how to critically think, how to ask questions. I have told you things for years. And now Bailing Out Benji is really trying to tell people how to think for themselves because it's not as simple as what we used to think.
No, it's a complex issue. It has many factors. And it's hard because it's really going to be like people going out and doing their own field research, probably, if you're looking to buy a puppy. I mean, I think that would be the best way. That's how I found the most surprising information and why my definition of a puppy mill is evolving. So it might just require people going out and trying to do their research themselves. While also coming to us to think Benji before you buy, because we can help with that in the information we know, because having research and records is helpful, but also that experience, I think, is helpful too.
And if we're doing that work how we do, we cannot be in the same place we were 10 years ago. If we have been doing all of this research and all of this learning and all of this going into the field, and we're still where we were 10 years ago, what the heck? Why are we beholden to that? So all of that work is what's moving us forward and is what's causing this evolution that we are going through. And I will say, it costs money. So
it's our favorite part of the episode. I swear.
When is Kristen going to say money? It's right now. So if you want to make a donation to Bailing Out Benji, we are entirely funded by public support. Not entirely by public support, but we're donation funded, is what I should say. And those donations are what we use to pay for the research, to pay for the software we use to compile it all, the FOIA requests, the hours and hours of staff time to find this data, to go on visits to the field, to meet these people where they are, to enable our volunteers to do the educations they do in their community and to help consumers be more informed. All of that takes resources. So always encouraging donations, always encouraging those recurring donors. So yeah, there's a link in the show notes.
And to put it into perspective, our budget's around $400,000 a year. I don't care if people know we're broke, right? $400,000 a year. We have 4 full-time staff, 2 part-time staff, and still accomplish everything we do with 0 money. And I think that that needs to be talked about because some of the other people in this space have way more resources, have way more staff, and their agenda is a little different than ours, and that's fine. But our listeners need to know, like, we're the smallest kids at the table, and now we are finding out that the research and the data is unpopular. And when we're talking about the research and data as it stands, and when we believe data doesn't have an agenda, we are now butting up against people who use data for an agenda. And when the data doesn't match, you get pushback. You get people who think you're the enemy, and we're not trying to sell anybody anything. Truly, we're in our data collection era. We're just trying to figure out what the problem is.
Trying to be transparent and give as much information as we can.
Well, anyway, thank you all so much for tuning in this week. If you have any questions, you can reach out to us. Please keep listening. Hate listen, love listen. Give us your feedback either way. We're 3 people in a room talking right now, and unless you tell us how you're feeling, if you have questions or concerns, we want to address them. We want to talk about it, but just reach out. We're really friendly people. Thanks, everyone.